Right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the fourth session of SWIC Week 2. Usual sort of notifications. This session is being recorded, and we would like those that are not speaking to have the cameras off and mics off, if at all possible. I believe the facilitators do have the ability to mute you, so don't be surprised if that happens, either on purpose or accidentally. This afternoon's session is looking at the provision of electricity to industrial sites. And for this afternoon, we've actually got 5 speakers, and they will be open to some panel questions part the way through the exercise as well, where we'll be looking to explore what probably needs to be done, what's working, what's not working, where we need to actually build the collaborative picture for South Wales. So our first speaker this afternoon, and each speaker will introduce themselves, but we've got Ben Godfrey from Western Power Distribution. Could I hand over to yourself, Ben, please?
Certainly, thank you, Tony. So my name's Ben Godfrey. I'm the Distribution System Operator Manager for Western Power Distribution. So within that remit, I look after the strategic planning of the electricity network, the operation of flexibility services, and the market development of those services as well. So in today's session, I'm going to give a little bit of an overview about who we are as Western Power, what we do, how we are enabling and delivering net zero, and how we interact with our customers to make sure that we're doing the right things in the right places. So on the next slide, I've got a bit of an overview about our remit. So we are not the national grid. We take the power from the transmission network, and we own and operate all of the assets underneath the transmission network. So all the smaller towers and poles across our region, and we deliver electricity all the way down the lower voltages, so from 132 kV down to the 230 volts that you'll see in homes and whole current metered businesses. We also do a lot of work around connecting generation on those voltages, and we see a broad spectrum of different technologies, whether that's PV, onshore wind, energy storage, or indeed any of the other demand categories like electric vehicles and heat pumps. The next slide shows a bit more information about the remit of our operations. So we cover Southwest, South Wales and the Midlands, and we serve about 8 million homes and businesses across that. So that's roughly about sort of 25% of the UK. We have a huge asset base that we own, operate and maintain, and we do all of that, including providing high levels of reliability on the service for only £98 out of the average domestic bill. So that's about 17%. The next slide talks through about some of those roles and responsibilities that we do. So we're very much focused on keeping the lights on. Within the UK, we enjoy one of the highest reliability networks across the whole of the world. And that is really due to the amount of focus that we place on keeping the lights on. And we know that this is the security is going to the focus on security is going to increase as more things become electrified and we start moving towards net zero. We also maintain the equipment, so the electricity networks were built out from when electricity was invented. So we have a range of different asset ages of assets on our network. It's not unknown for our assets to be sort of 60, 70 years old, and clearly we replace them as and when the asset lifespan expires. And this gives us a great opportunity to also help support net zero by forward looking at what might be happening in an area, and then as and when our assets expire and come to the end of their life, we can replace them with a size of asset that would be fit for the future. And so we're really trying to embed this fit for 2050 aspiration within our network. We fix the network when it breaks or when it gets damaged, and that's from high winds, that kind of types of issues that we've had recently, all the way through to contractors digging in roads and hitting our cables, third-party damages, those types of things. We also connect customers, and this is an area that we're expecting a huge increase on, particularly with new technologies connecting onto the network, but also new processes and industry moving to other electrification forms of consuming power. And so we're expecting, as well as connecting new customers onto the grid, we're going to be seeing an increase in demand requirements for those customers. And then finally, we also operate a smart system as well. So previously we've been very focused on making sure that there's sufficient network capacity for our winter peak demand. Increasingly now we're starting to see that our network becomes most heavily utilised in the summer because there's lots of solar connected on there, or pockets where we've got dense saturation of wind. And we're really keen on making sure that we can balance the demand and generation locally. That takes the pressure off our network, but in doing so we need to make sure that we're providing the right signals and making the right relationships with industry and with domestic customers and suppliers and all the other entities within the energy system in order to really support that local balancing. The next slide shows a bit of the challenge, and whilst WPD has a specific challenge, it's one that we share with other network operators across the whole of the UK. And so we can see that from a demand consumption point of view, we've got around about 300 terawatt hours worth of electricity that's consumed every year. But when we get to sort of 2050, depending on the scenario that we're starting to see play out, we can expect a doubling or perhaps even greater of the amount of electricity that's being consumed. So huge investment will be required on the networks. And we want to make sure that we do that in the right time, in the right locations, so that the networks are not a barrier. Similarly, in terms of feeding that generation in, there's going to be a significant amount of generation coming, connecting to the main transmission network, so offshore wind, those types of large infrastructure projects will be connecting directly into the transmission network. But we're also going to be seeing a huge amount of embedded generation connect onto our network, and we're really gearing up to make sure that we can handle that and accommodate that. Again, if we can generate electricity as close as we can to where the demand is actually consuming it and in the right time periods, then that really takes the pressure off of networks, makes things cheaper for everyone. So we really want to make sure that we're incentivizing things to be connected in the right places. And to do so, the next slide shows how we forecast that kind of activity. So it might have paused there. I don't know if it's just me, but sorry. So the next slide shows about the totality of our network investment. So we've just put up together our business plan, and we submitted that to our regulator, who governs how much money we're allowed to invest back into the networks. We did that back in December. And what we're really trying to do with that business plan for 2023 through to 2028 is deliver and keep the UK on a pathway to net zero. So we're increasing the amount of expenditure that we expect we're going to need to make on the network from roughly about just over £1 billion a year that we spend on the network to today, and through the next period that will be going up to about 1.34 billion pounds. So roughly about a 30% increase in that kind of expenditure. A lot of that expenditure is going to go on resilience of the network, so whether that's physical resilience or cyber resilience, but also investment in new capacity, because we recognise that lots of people are moving towards electrification as a primary and easy way to reach net zero. We fully support that and are really pleased to see that progress, and we want to be able to provide all that capacity for those customers. So some of the totals we can see is that we've got 10 gigawatts worth of generation connected onto our network at the moment. By the end of that 2028 period, we expect that to be closer to 15 gigawatts. We've got about 120,000 electric vehicles within our region at the moment, and we expect that to grow to about 1.2 million. So huge increase in that. And again, with heat pumps, we've got around about 60,000 as of 2020. We're expecting that to get closer to 900,000. So all these targets are in line with the national grid future energy scenarios, but also in line with the Committee on Climate Change 6 carbon budget. So very much delivering that kind of pathway, balanced pathway towards achieving net zero. And in terms of how we forecast that, then the next slide shows a little bit more about some of the processes that we've got within the forecasting activity that we do. So we recognise that customers are going to be changing the way that they interact and consume electricity, and we capture all of that information. So looking at what the future for electrification is in the particular region. So looking at homes and businesses, the type of processes and heating needs that they have within the existing customer base, and also looking at some of the new technologies that are becoming along, whether that's electric vehicles, heat pumps, different types of generation, different types of industrial processes, and making sure that we've got all that information and providing a good view about where we think that clustering is going to occur on our network, what sort of timescales that's going to occur, and making sure that we've got a really good overview and forecast of how we think that's going to play out all the way out to 2050. And we use that information to drive the network investment on our area. So we've published a lot of information about what our forecasts are, and we dive that down. We spread that information out across our website down to a very local and granular level, so we can explain in the different regions what we expect to happen, when we expect that to happen, and that can give confidence that we're planning for the right things and we're making the right investments available on our network to deliver the goals of net zero. And this also allows us to be able to start using some other non-network solutions to help support that transition. So easy to crack on and build new substations, put in new underground cables and new overhead lines, but all that takes time. And if we get it wrong, we run the risk of having stranded assets on the network that are sort of expensive and not being fully utilised. So we're starting to look at how we can use flexibility and time shifting consumption and demand patterns and generation, bringing that online and providing revenues back to customers, businesses and generation providers, so that they can consume when it's most abundant on the network, or provide any electricity back onto the grid when it's most needed. And we will directly provide revenue opportunities for people who want to play in that kind of flexibility. So very similar to the time of use tariffs, Economy 7, that we've seen for a number of years on our network. We're now starting to see that in particular locations that can be helpful for distribution network operators as well. And the next slide shows a little bit about the process that we go about to make sure that we're getting that correct. So we do a lot of work looking at what's already connected to our network and understanding where the electricity is used and how that's being consumed in homes and businesses at the moment. We then look at what people are coming to us with connection inquiries and making sure that we've got a good view about how this might be changing to a kind of short to medium term. So from now through to a kind of 18, 24 months time. We then go out to wider stakeholder engagement, particularly with local authorities and other major energy users, and understand what's happening in the local areas, what the particular driver is for new capacity, or how interactions with electricity might be changing out into the future. And we build all that back in so that we've really got a rich picture about how we expect the network to develop under a number of different scenarios, at different ranges, all the way out to 2050. And having a good idea about a range of credible outcomes gives us the confidence that we can plan a network to meet any one of those different scenarios across any of the different timescales. And it means that we have a plan in place for any eventuality, so that if we need to quickly develop new capacity, we know exactly what we need to do, and we can get ahead and deliver that. The next slide shows a little bit more about how we regionalise that. So this isn't just a very high level summary looking at national ambition. We really dive down into a much lower level of detail, and we build this bottom up analysis based on our primary substations. So there's about 1,200 primary substations across the whole of WPD's regions. And so for each one of these, we know exactly what customers are connected, how they currently consume energy, how we expect them to change energy consumption patterns out into the future. And that gives us a real local flavour of how net zero is going to impact us on the network, and make sure that we can really invest in the right things at the right time. But we don't just keep all that information to ourselves. The next slide shows a bit of how we sort of spread that information out. So we do a lot of engagement, and we summarise all that information about what we've learned, what we've heard, and how we've acted onto that. And so there's a range of stakeholder feedback reports. All of the raw data about the scenarios, the technologies, the locations is available on our DFES map. Available through our map hub. And for each licence area, so the 4 licence areas, the East and West Midlands, South West and South Wales, we also pull together reports about what the prevailing technology summaries are going to happen. So, what's likely to happen for wind or for solar in this particular area, how are heat pumps likely to be affected. And then all of the underlying data for all those technology summaries is available to download or to visualise on our website. And this isn't just a process that we do once every 5 years and put it on a shelf. This is something that we do every year in order to provide most up-to-date forecasts for our network and ensuring that we're investing in the right places at the right time. Latterly, on the next slide, it shows a little bit about how we've started to do proactive sharing of this data. So back in 2020, we went out to all local authorities in our region because we recognise that they're a key stakeholder. We proactively shared what's happening in their particular area and what we expect the forecasts are. And that enables us to kind of hone in on exactly what kind of investment scenario we need to plan for in that particular area. And I think what we're really interested to do is make this a bit broader. So we understand that electricity is going to be, and the interactions with electricity are going to be critical across a number of broader whole system sectors. So whether that's industry or healthcare or transport or heat or water or other utilities, we really want to start understanding, how we can best share our forecasts and what we're investing for with those particular stakeholders, share the data, share the information, and making sure that we've got a common understanding so that we can feed back into our investment process, investment plans and processes, and making sure that we are delivering what our customers are going to need out into the future. And sometimes, our customers won't necessarily know exactly what they need, but just by getting more information on that, then that can really help us support us in that kind of endeavour. The next slide shows a bit more information about how we're managing uncertainty. Because whilst we're really good at forecasting, we're definitely going to get a lot of our forecasts wrong. It's just the nature of things. We think by scenario planning and having a good credible range of outcomes, we should be broadly on the money, but we need to make sure that we revisit those forecasts all the time. And it's critical when we're putting together a business plan for a 5-year window, we need to be able to manage that uncertainty. So what we've signalled back to our regulator is that, yes, we expect to spend just over £1 billion in the next 5 years on investing in new capacity on the network. But we do think that could go higher or lower. And if it goes lower, then we're going to be giving that money back and making sure that we're sharing that back with our customers and making the bills cheaper. However, if it goes higher, we need to have agile mechanisms in place, agreed with the regulator, so that we can deliver that capacity. We don't want to be stuck here saying, we can't deliver the capacity needed for our customers. And we think that total investment might go up to 2.3 billion. So there's quite a wide range of uncertainty, and that's why we're really keen to make sure that we are on the money with delivering everything that we need to. Finally, just to summarise then a few sort of key tidbits from our latest business plan. We are looking to increase our spend quite dramatically, up to 1.34 billion per year, but we are going to be keeping bills flat. So a number of efficiency savings, but also clever financing means that the bill impact to customers will be negligible and the bills will remain broadly flat. So we're really maximising on our output whilst reducing the input that we require to deliver that. The plan is a net zero pathway, so we think we're well on the way. But how aggressive that net zero is needs to be reflected to the needs of our customers. So if people want to go slower, that's fine. We can hold back the expenditure, share that with customers. But if they want to go faster, we definitely encourage that. But we need to have credible evidence to make sure that we can do that. So networks won't be a barrier to that. But what we will need to do is build on relationships and making sure that we have the right level of information and right pipeline information so that we are building capacity out in the right place. And hopefully to do that in a transparent way, we've making all of our data available, and we're really keen to help share that data, seek feedback on it, and work out, you know, how we can help net zero be delivered through all of the connected homes and businesses within our region, and making sure that you yourselves have confidence with all of our forecasts are correct, and that's going to get you the output and keep you on a net zero pathway. So hopefully that's you know, a good summary of what WPD are and what we're doing. Happy to sort of take questions or receive feedback or output on how we could you know, help better support that kind of endeavour.
Thanks a lot, Ben. Lot to think about from that. Certainly a lot of activity going on. I'd like to actually introduce Hamza Ahmed. Could you present your next piece, please, from the Energy Systems Catapult?
Yes, thank you very much. Just waiting for the PowerPoint.
Is Cara, are you pulling that up, please? Or...
Hamza, did you say that you'd like us to share your slides?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, 2 seconds. I'll just quickly speak with Richard and we'll get those uploaded for you.
Thanks. Would you like to introduce yourself, Hamza, while the
Yeah. That's, I mean, it's not an issue. I can share my own if that's quicker. Oh no,
I think we've got them.
Well done. That was pretty quick. Now, thank you very much. Hi everybody. Thanks for dialing in. I'd just like to introduce myself first. So my name is Hamza Ahmed. I'm a power systems engineer, and I work for a company called the Energy Systems Catapult. So just a brief background about myself on the next slide. Yep. I'm a power system engineer, and my previous roles, I actually worked for the National Grid. I spent a few years mostly in the system operator, and I spent 2 years in the transmission owner. So I know firsthand how difficult the transition to net zero is. It's a very difficult technical challenge, and it comes with a lot of socio-economic issues as well that we as a whole system need to deal with. So I'm just going to go on to what we do on the next slide. So the Energy Systems Catapult, we were set up by the government. So we're a government-funded body, partially funded, to be a sort of centre of excellence. We provide technical, commercial, and policy expertise to the whole industry. We aim to have a whole systems working approach. We are a independent, and the key word here is technology agnostic. You know, we use whatever means, whatever technology there is out there to deliver net zero. We believe in collaborative working with the DNOs, the transmission owner, the system operator, and provide quite a range of capabilities. So we have our own tools, modeling tools, and different computer simulation software that we can actually plug into and get different market scenarios. So we can try and anticipate what the EV adoption rate will be in 20 years based on a certain policy, and we can get different outcomes based on that. Okay, just focusing on the slide, we've got experts across various fields. We've got people who have worked within the transmission industry, within the distribution sector. We've got hydrogen experts, gas and oil, but we've also got market and policy expertise within the company. Thank you very much. Now, again, just going back to this whole system approach, why do we believe this is so important, and why is it an emphasis on something that the Energy Systems Catapult delivers? So to actually achieve net zero, the only plausible way that will be done, and we believe, is if the industry, consumers, electricity from top to bottom all work together. So the adoption of more wind and solar. Today, we've got more wind power than there has ever been before, and taking away the crisis that's happened in Europe and the Ukraine crisis, electricity prices were rising. Constraint costs have been going up. So we've got more wind and solar, which is great. You know, we're decarbonising the system, but how do we now utilize storage? We used to have coal power stations where you could easily access the coal that was stored outside the power station. We don't have that anymore. We can't burn coal. So how do we innovate and capture that excess power and technology? So we look at things like that. We look at different market scenarios. So is the current market fit for purpose? We actually published a report, Introduction to Nodal Pricing. So that was floating on alternative market system. And also we closely look at ESO and DSO market functions, and we do that for this country and other countries around the world. How can the ESO and the DSO work more closely together, offer more market solutions? And as I just mentioned, we work with clients around the world. We also have an ongoing project with the Welsh government, but we've worked with the Taiwan government, the government of Brazil, and various other different authorities. On the next slide, I would like to introduce a project that the Energy Systems Catapult is currently working on with the Welsh government, and it is called the Welsh Future Energy Grid for Net Zero. Now, on the next slide, I just give a bit of background about what this project is actually all about. We've signed up to hit a net zero target by 2050. The existing infrastructure in Wales, it needs to be able to cope with the increased electricity demand from uptake of heat pumps, uptake in EVs. If the whole street is charging their car and also using heat pumps at the same time, you know, do we need to be more flexible? And also, what is the transmission system going to look like in the future? And is the current infrastructure fit for purpose? Is there any recommendations we can make on how we can facilitate the scenario and have the have Wales as a whole act as an example for other countries around the world? And the last bullet point I'd like to really highlight that is, how do we achieve net zero in Wales, where the investment is efficient but nobody is left behind? And touching on the next slide, the challenge for implementing net zero within Wales, the aim is to make Wales an example to the rest of the world on how to be a leader in implementing low carbon technologies, but in a sustainable manner, dealing with the increased electrification of residential demand and also industrial demand, converting all the buses to electric buses, you know, factory production, taking gas away and introducing electricity. What's that going to look like? And clearly setting out future requirements for a Welsh future energy grid. So it needs to be a credible pathway to net zero. How do we expect to do that? Which is on the next slide. So the solution that we are setting about for this is jointly developing a gas and electric infrastructure with our key stakeholders. So key stakeholders being the South Wales Industrial Cluster. The project will be led by the Welsh Government, and the Welsh Government will ensure our suggestions fit with the policies of the Welsh Government. Independent advice is offered by Ofgem on the project, and the ESC, the Energy Systems Catapult, will develop a whole system scenario using our in-house modelling tools to ensure the development is every credible scenario is considered. So my previous colleague Ben, he touched on the future energy scenarios and the DFES, the distribution future energy scenarios. Those scenarios take into account credible different pathways. What if in one scenario the uptake in EVs isn't as fast as the next scenario, and where does hydrogen fit into this? So the future energy scenarios need to consider different scenarios, and our in-house modelling tool takes that into account and will actually churn out different outputs based on what we have put into the machine. And that then allows us to conduct different analysis and say, under this scenario, you'll need to build this. Under this scenario, you'll need to do X, Y, Z. And on the next slide, sorry, I think slide, can we go to slide 7, please? Yeah, so if we can go to the Welsh Future Grid whole system approach slide.
I was going to say, that's the end of the slides after that.
Oh no, it's a previous slide.
Okay, so sorry.
That's all right. Yeah, just before that. I'd just like to. There's a slide on there that shows the Welsh electricity grid as a diagram.
I think that's missing, Hamza, off the slide pack.
That's fine. What I would like to do is I'll just share my screen and I'll finish the rest of the slide. Yep. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So apologies about that. So the issue that we have with this project and what we're actually trying to solve, this is the diagram on the right. It's taken from the Electricity System Operator publication. It actually shows North Wales and South Wales as two separate clusters. And in the middle of Wales, you don't have much HV infrastructure. So the whole system approach that we're taking to this project, we need to consider the distribution of demand. I believe it's 60 to 70% of the demand is actually in the south, and take into account the population distribution and the future generation connection that is expected to come on, and that includes new interconnectors. So there's an Irish interconnector coming into Pembroke within the next 2 years, new wind farm connections. So all the wind wants to connect in Scotland, but if the floating wind farm technology improves, does that mean we're going to get a lot more wind connecting to the south of Wales? And our algorithms and our programs, it actually, while we are focusing on South Wales as a cluster today, it also focuses on the north as a whole system. And we're not just focusing on the transmission side, we're focusing on what is going to happen down to distribution and local demand. And again, the challenge is, deliver this in a sustainable way and have the outputs as an example to the rest of the world and how it can be done in a sustainable manner, and setting out key timelines. And the key timelines are actually set up here. So The information about this project, by the way, it's available on our website, and I will share the link for that later on. But at the moment, we are in phase 1A, so we are setting the project up, and we've just completed an evidence review. The main bulk of the work of the project will actually happen in phase 2 around May this year, where we will then conduct our scenario approach. So we're actually going to input those different FES scenarios based on, you know, are you going to have massive wind adoption? Are you going to have massive EV adoption? Everybody used to think diesel was okay, but all of a sudden a policy change has rendered it, you know, it's rendered it, you can't adopt diesel cars, or you can't buy them anymore. So again, we take into account, what if there's a policy change with hydrogen? What would that mean for industry? So it's a very interesting subject, and it's a very interesting project overall. And that's the end of the slides for me. Novel, thank you very much.
Thanks
and again,
a lot, Hamza.
Yeah, any questions, please drop them in the chat box. Thank you very much.
Okay, we've got Rod Llwydwaith from WBE, a local biomass packaging.
Hi everyone. Thanks for joining. Some really interesting speakers so far. I'll introduce myself first. I'm Rod Llwydwaith. I'm the CEO of a company called Western Bioenergy. We're based in Margam, just to the east of Port Talbot, in South Wales. If we go to the next slide, I'll just flip through these quite quickly. What we're basically looking to do is to explain who we are, what we're doing in the area, and what projects we've got, our current operating business position, and then there's a call really for some collaboration from people who are interested to partner up on some projects which will tick a lot of authority and Welsh Government boxes and goals going forward. And it's something that we're really keen to sort of get into from our business viewpoint. So we're a 15 megawatt sustainable biomass generation facility with 35 megawatts of export thermal capacity available for a project or a number of projects. Next slide, please. That's the overview of the facility. We're located just off junction 38 on the M4, so it's very accessible. If you flip to the next slide as well, please. We take in around about 150,000 tonnes of feedstock, predominantly from Wales. As you see, there's a weighbridge facility where we do quality checks on our moisture and to determine the energy that's delivered to the site. This is all verified by Ofgem, and we are currently at a 40,000 tonne negative CO2 sink because it's a sustainable operation. We service a number of around about 130 employees in the area, and there are just under 25 employees direct on site at the moment. Next slide, please. So we take in the biomass, we put it into a boiler system, and that generates with clean emissions monitoring and control some superheated steam to go to a generator, twin generators to drive a brush generator, twin turbines to drive a brush generator, and generate 33 megawatts out onto the grid. So next slide, please. So working for Wales, the plant was built in 2008, supported by Welsh Government grant funding, and it generates around about 120 gigawatts per year. That's relates to the 15 megawatts per hour. And as a guideline, it's around about 50% of Neath Port Talbot borough's service for half the houses, which is around about 30,000 houses a year. As I say, we've got 25 staff that are on site, and outside, as far as forestry and haulage, we tend to have a number of around about 110 to 130 other sustainable jobs. We burn clean wood, virgin log, brash, slab wood, and recycled wood on site, and we are accepted to take in a number of diseased feedstocks as well, so including larch dieback, Phytophthora remora, etc. And we've worked with the government to reduce Welsh greenhouse gases since 2009, tackling targets, and it's something that we're keen with SWIC to try and partner up with some larger companies to do a better job at that, really. Next slide, please. Current position, we are a UK company, UK owned, and a local management team. Since COVID shutdown did affect us, and we bounced back better, is to use a phrase, and got some investment in the plant. So we've improved some health and safety, environmental systems on site. We've got some new and improved feedstock agreements, so the future's looking good currently. And we've just spent in the region of £3 million in the last 2 years to upgrade the facility for availability benefits, and also for emissions control. We've improved the emissions systems on site as well. So we have some new investment decisions that have been made at this facility. Private wire, that we are looking to bring in partners to feed directly with our electricity, and also we have the heat options for them. Our improvements in combustion and emissions control have been very successful, and also in the utilisation and cleaning down of the systems for that availability, to improve that availability. And the heat utilisation, we can provide it to local heat networks and supporting industries. We can look at drying options or other emerging technologies which we're keen to invest in as partners as well. And also we're looking at carbon capture on site. That's something that we feed into a bigger picture, which I'm sure Tony could explain within the SWIC group, with a cluster, sorry. And that's something that we've looked at and are further down the road of developing something imminently. We're looking for community participation as well. We try and embed ourselves in with the local support that we get from our authority. And we are looking at local ownership models of projects and to deal with other business partners. Next slide. Okay, so to keep it short and sweet, we are seeking sustainable clean food ventures for both heat and power provision, such as vertical hydroponics and aquaponic off-takers. We feel that the future is, with the size of our organisation, would benefit from involvement in the South Wales industrial cluster, and that's what it provides for us. And also we have the options to site data centres, which will create jobs in the area. A number of companies can join with us, not to be worried about size, because we can cut up pieces of the pie of outputs accordingly. So it's something that we're looking to deal with small and large companies as well, and get everyone involved. And we can provide sustainable energy solutions. As I stated before, we are a negative carbon sink currently, and we do look and take our strategy as far as land management very seriously, and that's part of our job. And with current affairs that are around with energy prices, we can offer protection for energy prices going forward, certainly for the next 3, 5 or 10 years. And so as part of that, we're not looking just to make a sell of things. We're looking to grow businesses, and we are also willing to invest in any options that are presented to us. So please feel free to contact us, or through Tony and SWIC, get in touch if any of this is sort of interesting and you're in the locality. Okay, thanks.
Thanks a lot, Rod. Yeah, can we pass over to Rosie, please?
I believe I'm next, but I think things froze for a second there, so I'm going to assume that you've introduced me. Is that right? Lovely, thank you. So my name is Rosie Gillam, and I work for a company called Egni Co-op, and we provide community-owned rooftop solar PV for schools, community buildings, businesses, and other buildings, mostly across South and West Wales. So we were set up in 2013 by our parent charity called Our Remit. Our Remit is a charity which aims to tackle climate change, and they have 2 projects, one of which is or many projects, but we are Egni was set up in order to own rooftop solar PV, and Our Remit also are associated with another company who own our small wind farm. out of 5 megawatts. So we fund and manage solar PV installations in order to combat the climate emergency and help everybody move towards net zero. We are now the largest rooftop solar co-op in the UK, with about 4.5 megawatts of solar panels on roofs. And also, really importantly, we run an education programme for schools based around energy, around climate change and around cooperative entrepreneurship. So we partner with local authorities and with private businesses to reduce their carbon emissions and reduce their electricity bills at no cost, no upfront cost to them. So we are responsible for developing any project, obtaining all the permissions, doing all the surveys, the feasibility studies, and we manage the install process. And at no point during that feasibility and kind of up to the kind of contract signing stage do any costs fall on the building owners. And even if the project doesn't go ahead, we still bear those costs. We install solar panels, then we monitor and maintain a system for 20 years, which means that we enter into a 20-year lease with the building owner and a 20-year power purchase agreement with the landlord, the bill payer. And the bill payer is basically agreeing to buy the solar electricity from us when they're using it. They don't have to use any particular amount of solar electricity. And the price of the solar electricity from their own roof will always be cheaper than their equivalent grid electricity rate. And so we have effective monitoring systems because our business model relies on us making those systems work as best they can for 20 years. We take care of all the monitoring and the O&M, the operations and maintenance side of things, which is a great advantage, I think, to lots of businesses, because if they were to install their own panels, perhaps they wouldn't have a dedicated person making sure that that system, the PV system, is working well for 20 years. So the way we make our money is we sell solar electricity to the site at a cheaper rate than their normal electricity supply. And we always aim to maximise occupier savings to make our offer attractive to people. And typically at the moment we're offering a 10% or more discount on the person's normal daytime unit rate. So far we have installed on 88 solar sites on roofs in Wales, about 4.5 megawatts of rooftop solar, about £4.5 million. Last year we prevented 1,200 tonnes of CO2 being emitted, and we saved those sites in total about £100,000 plus in electricity bills. And the way we fund our installs is we usually get an upfront loan from the Development Bank of Wales to do the install process, and then we convert that loan into community shares. So we offer people from Wales and beyond the opportunity to invest and get a fair return for their investment. So we have over 1,000 people who are investors in our company and get 4% this year return on their investment. So far we have 88 sites across Wales, mostly in the south and west, and primarily these have been with local authorities and the Archdiocese of Cardiff. So about 50 schools and a number of other facilities and care homes and work sites, primarily with Newport City Council, Swansea and Pembrokeshire out west. And then we also partnered with Carmarthenshire, Neath Port Talbot, Rhondda-Cynon-Taf, Bridgend and Conwy councils to provide some solar PV on their community occupied sites. We've provided PV to 30 community buildings, and to those community buildings that we're on at the moment we provide free electricity, which means that they can focus their efforts and their finances on doing what they do best, which is providing whatever it is that they do for their community. To date, we have installed on just 5 private businesses, from 20 kilowatts on an office to 200 kilowatts on an automotive factory run by an international company. We'd like to do lots more with private businesses, but there's a few issues which come up when we partner with a private business. One of the blockers for some people, or the kind of stumbling blocks perhaps, is the fact that they might have a mortgage on the building, which means that we have to gain lender consent, which is just a slightly time-consuming process which has some cost. But it's totally, it's not insurmountable. and we've got agreements with people who have mortgages on their buildings. The second issue we've come across is the involvement of pension funds in perhaps if the pension fund has an interest in the building on which we are proposing to put solar panels. Some sites that we've worked with have had this situation, and the pension fund has signed off for permission for us to be on the roof. And then in one case, the owners of the building, the operators in the building, decided that they didn't want to go down that route because they found it too time consuming. One issue that we found is that the legal process and the approval process from various levels of the company can be slow, particularly with larger companies or with perhaps multinationals. But it's not been a blocker, it's just been maybe a slow process. And majorly, the stumbling block or the blocker at the moment is awareness of our offer. We're really confident that what we offer people is what a lot of businesses would like. They don't have to invest any money, they get to reduce their carbon, they get to partner with an organisation who is driving at all the good things of reducing carbon and working with children to raise awareness of climate change, but we don't have a huge amount of visibility across the business world in Wales, and it would be really helpful for us if your members were made aware of our presence and what our offer entails. So the last slide is just a bit about our education programme. So we're working in schools. We have an education officer who's full-time, and she works in Pembrokeshire, Swansea and in Newport, South Wales, with various schools, junior school and secondary schools, in order to equip pupils with knowledge, skills and experiences that inspire them to be ethical and informed citizens of Wales and the world. So she works within the new Welsh national curriculum and helps teachers to provide them with the resources and the assistance they need to train children to understand the very complicated and sometimes depressing issues of the situation we're in terms of climate change and technology at the moment, in a way which they can understand and which inspires them to make a difference and inspires their teachers as well. So she works with a rapper, an ex-mining engineer, an artist and a series of STEM ambassadors, and goes into schools giving pupils the kind of inspiration, the knowledge they need in order to motivate them to act. So after all, next slide is not coming. There we go. So a gratuitous picture of our largest install to date. So 500 kilowatt peak on the National Velodrome of Wales in Newport, Gwent. One of the most beautiful sites in Newport. Just a pity it's only the seagulls that can see it. And thank you. Any questions we'll take after the next presentation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Rosie. I'll put a couple of questions in the chat for later as well. So yeah, we'll get back to you on that. Could I introduce Ben from Costain, that's going to talk about a project that's quite interesting, or I think so. Thanks, Ben.
Afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I'm Ben Clegg, project manager for Costain, and I'll be talking about our project, which is RAS, or Resilience as a Service. Cool, there we go. Yeah, so a bit of the project overview and what is RAS. So RAS is an innovation project, and the core aim is to improve the operational resilience of electricity distribution networks in remote areas. And it's a partnership between SSEN, Costain and E.ON. So essentially, RAS is the provision of a battery energy storage system at a substation which is in a remote community. So following storm events or a fault on the line, such as Storm Arwen last year, and we've seen Storm Dudley this year, it's left many customers in remote locations without power for a good few hours, or potentially in certain cases days. And so what was found in the phase 1 of the project was that 114 potential sites in remote locations specifically, I suppose, relating back to Wales, in northern and western Wales, were customers that could get benefit from this project. And this is in an event of a fault, Raz, the controller, would automatically and seamlessly switch on the battery at that substation when there's a fault to the 33 kV line, provide power for a certain period of time. And this would provide a window in which the fault up the line could either be fixed or provide a time frame in which a more permanent power solution could be then taken to the substation and provide the customers with continuous power. The concept as well represents a flexible solution for these areas where traditionally reinforcement of the use of DNO standby generation or reinforcement traditionally or generation in terms of generators would either be very expensive. So that's where the Raz main kind of concept comes into play. A way of supporting the economics of a solution of Raz would be using the battery in other services on the electrical system. So whether that's dynamic containment, supporting renewables and how they can feed into the grid. And if there's certain times when it's peak times in the grid, that it could go into the battery instead. We've also sort of, what is going to be explored in our phase 2 approach is whether there's transportable Raz, so you could move the battery in certain locations where it could be utilized better. And you could look at forecasting as well. So the key benefits of this approach is it's cost effective and the local network resilience will improve the service to customers. It's also a lower carbon solution to the conventional transporting a temporary diesel generator to site, which supports the UK's transition to net zero. The project's funded through Ofgem's network innovation competition. So for our project, we've got 10.9 million. So just a bit overview of the partners and what they bring to the project. So to the right hand side, we've got SSEN, and they're looking at how they can bring the benefit to their customers and looking at where they can, using their knowledge of their network and the remote locations they've experienced, where best they can bring this benefit. And they've had experience as well of working on other innovation projects and tying them together across their networks. Ian on the left hand side are providing the technical resource to the project, looking at best value for money for a demonstrator and bringing in their supply chain to provide the physical demonstration. And then Costain, our role in it is looking at the financial and commercial side and building a Project 13 application into an energy market and how a Raz provider would fit into a market. And bringing in our best practice we've got from our complex delivery of major projects and how we can use those learnings we've got from previous projects and implement it into this project here. So a bit more overview of the technical solution. We've got schematics or two schematics shown. So on the left hand side is a pictorial version showing the 33 kV supply coming in to a primary substation. And then if there's a fault, there's the Raz controller in the grey box kind of kicks in, recognizes the fault and seamlessly will then take the battery power and provide that to the customers. On the right hand side, again, it shows the schematic from the transition to the 33 kV network in the green, and then the traditional and what is already in place on the red 11 kV network, and then our proposed solution of where Raz might fit in on this. So the additional satellite 11 kV board with a temporary standby generation of the battery and a customer breaker to the Raz as well. And so that's just a bit of an overview of what Raz could fit into the network. So as mentioned, we're currently in phase 1 of the project, and this focused on site selection, system design for the chosen demonstration site. So the site chosen is in the Isle of Skye, Drynock, as where we look to do the demonstration. And then we've also refined the business case. We've just passed a stage gate review in January of this year, which is now leaning into phase 2, and we're starting to look at the demonstration and mobilising the trial. So a brief overview of the commercial solution. So we're looking at the Raz provider as an investor who owns and operates Raz as the central hub. And then around the outside is how they would interface with the stakeholders involved. So if we look at the top, the aggregator, it's looking at the availability and delivery of flexibility and the merchant revenues that come with this. On the right-hand side, there's the equipment suppliers and the supply chain and how they would feed in with maintenance, buying of the equipment, of the battery, and any equipment sales at the end. Another stakeholder is local renewables, shown at the bottom, and increasing the uptime of the grid and reducing the grid loading during the islanding mode, and just how that interfaces with the RAS provider. And the other one is the network operator on the left-hand side. So it's how this interfaces reacts to the requirements of the network operator, and when RAS kicks in an event or when it can be used for other revenue sources. And then there would be the fees that the network operator would provide for a RAS provider to use their battery storage system. So we see there's some potential evolution to the project. So currently, as mentioned, we're RAS phase 1, just transitioning into the Raz Trial Demonstration of our first site in Drynok. And we can see that there's potential for, if the trial goes well and we've got to get good results, that we can see that the RAS could be rolled out to the 114 sites identified at the start of phase 1 for these remote locations. And we can see that their further progression again could be in industrial and commercial applications. For example, if you've got banks or hospitals that need instantaneous power, which currently the backup could be a diesel generator, you've suddenly got a instantaneous switch of power supply from a battery with reduced carbon emissions as well. The other way could be, as the grid could be constrained in certain areas, you've got a battery where you can have power taken into and then use that power later, maybe for the production of hydrogen, green hydrogen at a local site, as a way of using that power outside of a constrained grid. So it's a very exciting project with a lot of potential to be used in various different markets, and not as well as just in its primary function of providing power to remote communities. So yeah, thank you very much. There's a lot of potential for this project, and look forward to taking any questions.
Thanks, Ben. That was quite good. Being as I live out in the countryside, I quite appreciate that sort of technology. I tend to have about 4 power cuts a year, so it's can be awkward. So yeah, could I invite the panel members to switch on their cameras, please? If they keep the mics muted initially until we go to them. I'd like to put a question forward to each of the panel members, because you come from such diverse activity areas within that electricity landscape. You're all going to have different lenses by which you look through the problem of decarbonisation and how we transition, or that whole electricity landscape is going to transition. So my question would be, almost, if you're interacting with industry, has that happened? Has it been successful? Has it not? And I'll probably approach the panelists in reverse order, if that's okay, starting with Ben Clegg, if I get it right first. If you could, yeah, just talk through any thoughts, Ben, that would be good.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Yeah, I suppose some of the interactions we've had with industry, and as we move into the phase 2 trial, is looking at battery procurement and the lead times. especially in this current climate, that the material availability is really pushing up the cost as well as the program. So that's one of the issues we're working through, and kind of within our time frame of our project is making sure it all works. And I suppose the other one as well is the connection agreement. Often in many of the different places you could put a battery, there's a big queue in terms of other people who want to feed into the grid and also take off it, and how we manage that in terms of this project and how it would be rolled out going forward is another main interaction with the industry that I think will be kind of a good insight from this project and an outcome.
That's great. I think Rosie's next. You're on mute, Rosie.
Classic. So the interaction with business partners that we've had so far has been really, really positive. And the people that we work with at the moment are, we have a very good relationship with them, and they're good advocates for us. But perhaps the place we fall down is that we haven't made many connections. We haven't made widespread connections with lots of areas of business, and so it's time consuming for us to start new projects, kind of starting from scratch, site searching or well, essentially cold calling people to see if they would like us. So it would be really positive for us if we were in contact with people who are driving towards this but don't quite know where to start and need a partner to help them out.
Okay, so is that something you would actually see that the SWIC organisation potentially helping with, that sort of network or contacts, basically?
Yeah, that would be incredibly helpful.
I suppose same would go with Ben's comment about it feels like it's a good approach, but coming back to the other Ben on the call, if you've got connections and many calls on the system at that point, how do we even gather what people's plans are? Those that are going in first may actually grab the capacity of the system when there could be other projects with, if you like, better credentials that are unknown. So yeah, okay, yeah. I think Rod was next.
Yeah, I think building up on what has been mentioned before, that when you sort of put your eggs in one basket, it gives you a business risk. What we're looking to do is to sort of spread it out a little and look at a number of options at the same time. We have made some progress with some partners, but again, Tony, as you mentioned, it's size as well. We're not a large, attractive company, but we can provide a service, and certainly with a lot of the targets and goals that are quite ambitious for Welsh Government. We can go a long way to meeting them, but we need to collaborate a lot more. So yeah, I'd add that the SWIC benefits us certainly from our business size, and also, as Rosie mentioned, to get other companies aware, to be aware of us and what we're doing and where we are and what we can actually provide. And hopefully somebody may pick up on one of these presentations today and pick up the phone and get in touch with us. So it's that type of, trying to draw people in to collaborate with you, but also they need to understand that the energy prices are moving, and by the time we get these projects rolling, it's 2 or 3 years down the road. So they need to be thinking now for the future and not, over the next 12 months, because certainly I have people ringing up with their expectations of, the first thing they say, what price will you give us electricity? Well, it's how big's a ball of string is. You don't know. So there's so many facets to look at, unfortunately, on these projects and what needs to be provided.
I think there's a real. Sorry, I'm echoing. Is it me? Still, am I heard? Can somebody put a thumbs up, please, if you can? Yeah, okay. Thanks. One of the things, coming back to particularly Rosie and Rod there, before we go back to Ben at WPD, which I think you're going to play a pivotal role going forward, Ben, in organising these, the smaller companies and they're the ones that are almost, the focus is on the large companies, and we got the big headline figures, especially in Wales, where we got huge companies on electricity and just the carbon capture requirements and the power required for that sort of process of capturing and liquefying CO2 for probable shipping is huge. But actually, the smaller businesses account for a huge number of jobs and economic activity. And what we're finding is certainly the supermarkets are trying to put pressure on those smaller businesses that typically supply food, drink, things like toilet paper and things like that direct to the supermarkets. And they're looking at net zero requirements contractually by 2030. So electrification for the smaller businesses may offer a route, but I think most of those small businesses are looking at everyone and sort of going, what do I do next? So I think, Rosie, you've got some solutions that can at least help those businesses. I mean, what we found from our surveys, those solar applications on roofs could actually give between 5 and 20% typical reduction in electricity on those smaller businesses that are not hugely energy intensive. So it can actually make a reasonable step for those small businesses and get them underway. And at that point, I'm going to come back to Ben, because Ben Godfrey, this is how you mentioned earlier, Ben, about obviously bringing in the large generation, the offshore renewables, the tidal, all those sort of systems, which are fantastic, have their own challenges, very technical as well. But a lot of our smaller businesses can do things themselves, obviously at smaller scale, and a lot of them feel, not to put too fine a point on it, a little put off when going to the likes of yourselves and saying, how do we do it? And the forms are, 50 pages long, quite technical, and they don't know how to fill that in. I know in Rosie's example, I think Rosie's company would take on that aspect and help the project. So over to you, Ben, mate. So.
Yeah, and it's a big challenge, and I think this is where we, as a sort of monopoly DNO, see ourselves shifting our relationship that we've got with the customers. So we cover 8 million homes and businesses across the UK, but I'd imagine the majority of those don't really know us, don't really have a relationship with WPD. They might call us when the power goes out or when they need a new connection, but apart from that, we sort of live disparate lives, really. But we are experts in electricity and electricity networks and systems, and we think that we can leverage some of that to help net zero. So we're not going to be developing generation or putting energy storage on our networks or doing things like that. We're specifically forbidden by the regulator from doing that, but we can support and help other people to do so. One of the big changes that is going on in the industry at the moment is previously and at the moment, if you're connecting a generation or demand project onto the network, and then that requires upstream reinforcement, then you'll be landed with a reasonable bill to get that connection away. The regulator has seen that this is being a bit of a barrier to connection, because where there's abundant capacity, then projects are quite cheap, but where you end up having capacity constraints, then that can put people off. And so they're asking now network companies to take on a greater proportion of those costs. So from 1st of April 2023, then any demand customer connecting on the network will no longer have to pay any of those upstream reinforcement costs. So then that's, it's a real green light there to industry, that if you want to move to electrification of some of your processes, then you will be able to do so at a reduced cost. And we think that we can use some of our experience and expertise and data to help support people either finding the right location for the projects or working out exactly how they get connected, what they need to ask for, and what they need to do. The hard bit is opening up those conversations and directing them into the bit of our company. So, we've committed to have community energy specialists whose ring-fenced job is to help communities and help other homes and businesses to develop local generation projects. And then we've got some net zero specialists as well, who are more on the kind of energy efficiency and electrification of heat and transport. But making those people available as a first point of call through connection surgeries and the likes, we should be able to take people through the right steps.
Just before I get to Hamza, because I'm going to ask Hamza to think about what's been just talked about, maybe use your project to connect. But you say you've got these surgeries, Ben. Are they already in existence, or say rather than SWIC reinvent something, is there something that we can maybe almost latch onto and expand to this wider brief for industry, or utilise those structures? Yeah.
The mechanisms are in place, and we've committed now to increasing the number of staff that are devoted to that activity. So I'll drop a link in the chat, and it explains how to access that service.
Okay, I'm going to ask Hamza, because you come across difficulties all the time with the systems thinking, really. You've heard from some of the other panelists. Is there anything you can add to that, maybe how we can start to even overcome those challenges?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. So as a whole, I will say it is definitely improving. The difficult part is actually the whole industry, from consumer, industrial, DNO, transmission and system operation. And I just think it's because of a legacy. It's left over from the days of the CEGB. It feels very siloed, very, very siloed, but it is getting better. What do I mean by siloed? So every stakeholder has a different interest. And one example that I came across in my previous role was, a large solar farm was commissioned and cables were put in place. This was in a part of the country. And overnight, the national grid started seeing voltage problems because of large cables. So because of a very large capacitive cable for that large solar farm, the national grid now has to pay a generator to absorb those high volts. So rather than net benefit or net helping, those costs are actually transferred onto the end consumer. So it's how do we get from A to Z a whole system approach? The data is getting better to be accessed, and even things like battery storage. People want to connect their batteries, but in a lot of instances, they don't realize that the DNO may have an active network management, which may stop them participating in the market services. And it's difficult for them to get that information unless they know who to talk to. So I would say the key thing for me is a whole system approach. It's knowing who to talk to, the right people. There needs to be some sort of electricity network association for local grids. So for South Wales, for example, from the transmission down to the consumer, there needs to be a whole system approach.
So certainly one thing I'm sort of picking up is, because of the diversity of activity and the requirements, it almost feels like SWIC, although it could be because it's got an industry base, that I don't believe we just act in industries, communities, it's transport, it's across the wider sector, because our businesses rely on people, they rely on workers getting to work, they rely on everything in the community, basically. So if we can focus some of that activity to actually get maybe some working groups together, but what I didn't want to do is reinvent the wheel if there's something already there. So if Ben or Hamza, you've got some ideas on what sorts of working groups we could look at in the future, that would be interesting to drop us a note. And if certainly we could start with the panel members, if you're interested in joining that sort of group, we would be we'll see what we can actually get moving. But certainly coming back to the comment you made, Ben, about the connection costs going forward, I didn't realise that till now, so that's something definitely I've learned. One of the things that we've got going in South Wales is, what do we do particularly, say, up the valleys and in those more isolated communities? And if those areas are stressed and their option for decarbonisation is more electric than, say, waiting for hydrogen and things like that, then we're putting those communities at a disadvantage. So are you saying basically, Ben, that those communities wouldn't be disadvantaged if they needed the grid reinforcing?
That is exactly what these regulations are looking to do, is to make sure that where there are kind of smaller entities that are looking to connect, then they won't be responsible for the really big infrastructure projects that could benefit a much wider people. So making sure that the cost of connection are reduced down as far as possible. So well, I think it's a real good point about making sure that there are some low regret investments that we can make now, particularly with rural communities who are off gas, and we know that that their only route to net zero is electrification, and that's where a lot of the capacity that we have put for the next price control 2023 to 2028 it is focused about making sure that those people are well served, and that will bring resilience benefits as well.
Okay. I'm just going to ask Flora Davies, who's been sitting quiet in the background, are there any questions you'd like to bring from the chat, Flora?
Hi, thank you. Yes, I have been reviewing the chat as the speakers have been talking, and thank you for everyone for your questions, and many of the speakers have been answering questions already. One of the ones that I don't think has been answered yet, but is from Owen Bailey to Ben Godfrey, and that is, how do you see the circular economy being utilised for network asset resource efficiency or valorization?
I think that's a really good question, and I think it's something we're really keen on. Whilst WPD, we've been recently acquired by a national grid, so we're part of the national grid family. So we're a very large organisation, but we are very much built from the bottom up, and so a lot of our the way that we deliver work it is very much from the local community. So I think we'd be very keen on supporting the circular economy. I think that's one of the benefits really that Wales is trying to push on, is making sure that we keep as much of the benefit that could be generated from renewable electricity to be captured within the local area. Got plenty of areas of our network, particularly the southwest, where there's been huge amounts of local generation being connected to the distribution network, but it's not really that evident of the money, of the value of that being retained in those local communities. So I think certainly Wales has the opportunity to do that. I'm sure that there's other elements of the circular economy that perhaps we could learn more from some of these discussions and use within our business.
Thanks for that. I mean, because part of SWIC's aspirations is to reshore and actually build new industries, that whole circular economy aspect is not just about being circular for the bits of work that we're doing, but actually the whole economy being greater. And that's where certainly the, say, Rosie and Rod, we'd be looking to companies like that to support those sort of increased activities where we put generation, either utilising from those assets or new assets in terms of what Rosie's proposing on the new facilities that you bring in to Wales. So yeah, okay. Could I just see if there are any hands up from the panelists for joining a group? I'm putting you on the spot now, but being as it feels like to actually exploit some of the things that we want to do, if SWIC actually arranged a group, would either yourselves or your organisations be willing to actually participate in that? Then we can look at whether that's SWIC organised, or maybe if you've got those surgeries already in place, Ben, we could latch on to those. Yeah. So there's general nod in there. Yeah.
I've pasted a link in the chat for Welsh Future Energy Grid, and it ties in quite nicely to the discussion today, because it also, you know, at some point we were obviously going to approach the network companies, WPD, National Grid, but it does tie in quite nicely to it, because it considers the future energy use and the electrification of the industry in the area. So yeah, that's, I think at some point that was the intention, to basically speak to key stakeholders as part of the project.
Well, we've got a concept underway within SWIC that's called the Clean Growth Hubs, and those are being particularly looked at in the Neathport Talbot local authority, and then at Barry at the moment, Cardiff and sort of Pembroke are coming up close behind. But actually, those would actually put different stresses on the electric networks in those very specific areas, and it'd be worth sort of understanding that and exploring those in detail so that we can expand out to the wider communities, I think. So if anybody in the general attendance would like to support that as well, if you could make yourself known to Flora in some way, if you put your email, Flora, in the chat. If you're frozen, Flora, or I'll put my email in the chat then, and Flora is saying yes. So if you could send an email to Flora if you would like to participate in that group, and I think that from our side has answered my questions. I'm going to ask the panelists if you've got anything else you'd like to contribute before we wrap up the session. I think that's good then. Okay, could I come back to? I'm echoing again, sorry. Could I come back to Cara or Richard at University of South Wales? How would you like to end the call?
Yeah, I was going to say hi, Tony. I'll end up putting a holding slide up now. So as soon as I put a holding slide up, it'll be the end. Okay, and I'll start the recording.
That's brilliant. I'd like to thank everybody for attending. Hopefully you've got something out of it. I think what we're trying to do is actually utilise this as a stepping stone to make things happen. As you may have gathered from our company, CR Plus, we're very much about making things happen, not particularly doing reports that sit on the bookshelf and stop there for years. So thanks a lot, everyone, and maybe see you at tomorrow's sessions. Thanks a lot. Thanks, speakers, again.
Thank you.
Cheers. Okay, goodbye.